do you define ceasefire?
Pretty much the way it is. It's a different part of the world. You know, I'd say in that part of the world, ceasefire is when you're shooting in a more moderate manner.
US Arab allies are being bombed by Iran while President Trump publicly avoids framing the situation as a full-scale war, a posture that analysts say reflects a deliberate attempt to limit escalation even as regional partners bear the brunt of direct attacks. After Tehran's strikes on US forces and allied positions across the Middle East, President Trump has offered explanations and justifications that many observers view as evasive, prioritizing political framing over immediate military retaliation. A deadly attack in Kuwait and the bombing of a warship have rattled the US administration, prompting an unusually cautious response from the White House that some critics describe as retreating from confrontation with Iran at a moment of heightened danger. President Trump has expressed public remorse over actions he described as having violated a ceasefire, remarks that came as Iran intensified its campaign against American interests and regional partners, further complicating Washington's strategic choices. A day after Iran's strikes on Kuwait's airport, President Trump publicly reiterated that a ceasefire was in effect, a statement meant to calm regional tensions even as questions remained about the durability and mutual acceptance of the pause in hostilities. Remember that on June 3 Iran's drone and missile strikes inflicted severe damage on the main terminal building at Kuwait's airport, creating dramatic scenes of destruction and disrupting civilian travel and relief operations across the region. Speaking at the White House on June 3, the US president delivered remarks about Iran that sought to frame American policy and intentions, offering reassurances to allies while signaling the administration's preferred diplomatic and military posture in response to the attack.
Mr. President, given Iran's attacks on Kuwait, this latest attack on Kuwait, is the ceasefire with Iran still on?
Well, you know, there's a reason for everything. And we hit them pretty hard the night before, and actually last night. And when it was explained to me, I said, all right, so we'll do that. But we've been hitting them pretty hard, a little bit. So there is a reason for certain things, and there's usually a reason that sometimes makes sense. But they did something, not a big deal. We got it, we nipped it in the bud very quickly, as we do. We're the greatest military in the world. But some people would say they were slightly provoked because we took a strong action for a different reason. So they were reciprocating. Yep.
Can you explain?
I hear the negotiation itself has gone very well, actually, very well.
Mr. President,
It could happen. I mean, if it happens, and it might not happen, you know, who knows? But if it happens, it could happen like over the weekend.
Mr. President, yesterday.
How do you define ceasefire?
Pretty much the way it is. It's a different part of the world. You know, I'd say in that part of the world, ceasefire is when you're shooting in a more moderate manner.
On day, Mr. President, yesterday you signed.
It's not bad, but it's true. I mean, it's a ceasefire there is much different than a ceasefire in other parts of the world. Yeah.
In recent days, hostilities between the United States and Iran have sharply increased, with both sides exchanging heavy fire that has escalated tensions and raised fears of a wider regional conflagration. The Iranian Navy says that on June 3 it targeted the command and control systems aboard a US destroyer, striking at what it describes as the ship's brain in Gulf waters. Tehran insists the strike was a direct response to what it calls aggressive US measures against Iranian commercial shipping, accusing Washington of harassment at sea. This development was announced in an official statement issued by Iran's Army Public Relations Office, giving the claim the stamp of formal military approval. According to that statement, the US destroyer was attempting to enter Iranian waters, a move Tehran frames as a clear violation of its sovereignty and red lines. However, US Central Command has flatly denied Iran's account, rejecting the claim that any US Navy destroyer was hit or successfully targeted. CENTCOM went so far as to say Iran is lying, insisting that American assets at sea are operating freely and without damage despite Tehran's statements. Iran's statement said, and I quote, "A few hours ago, following aggressive actions, violations of the regulations governing the Strait of Hormuz, and hostile acts against Iranian commercial vessels in the Sea of Oman, by the terrorist and aggressive US military, the Navy, immediately upon detecting and identifying the source of those actions, targeted the command and control center responsible for them." End quote. Meanwhile, eyewitnesses inside Iran reported hearing the sounds of explosions and active air defenses, according to Iran International, suggesting something significant was unfolding in the skies. Residents in eastern Tehran described the distinct thud of air defense fire and then a single, loud explosion around 8:45 p.m., sending people rushing to their windows and balconies. Similar air defense sounds were reported from Karaj and Urmia, while blasts were heard near Bojnord Airport, pointing to a wider pattern of aerial activity across multiple Iranian cities. Iran stressed that its navy is closely monitoring what it calls a criminal and aggressive enemy presence, keeping constant watch on U.S. movements in the region. The statement warns that the Navy will respond to any hostile act in the shortest possible time, signaling readiness for rapid retaliation if it feels provoked. Tehran further vowed that its forces will exact revenge in the harshest manner for the blood of the sailors of the destroyer Dina, framing its actions as avenging fallen martyrs. This latest claimed attack comes after both Tehran and Washington exchanged fire under the shadow of a fragile ceasefire, raising fears that the truce is rapidly unraveling in the Gulf. At least one person has been killed in the devastating aftermath of Iran's deadly strikes on Kuwait. Kuwaiti authorities also alleged that multiple people sustained injuries following Iran's drone attacks. With the international airport suffering significant damage, Kuwait has suspended all commercial flight operations. Airport operations in Kuwait are reportedly expected to remain halted until further notice from authorities. The airport had only reopened for normal operations on June 1st before the strikes took place. Kuwait's Ministry of Defense confirmed that Iran launched multiple hostile drones during its June 3rd attack. According to Kuwait's Ministry of Defense, Iran fired 13 ballistic missiles and 17 drones during the assault. The drones reportedly targeted the passenger terminal building at Kuwait International Airport. Gulf allies have now come out strongly against Iran following attacks on Bahrain and Kuwait. The Gulf Cooperation Council released a statement on June 3 condemning what it called ongoing aggression. The GCC reportedly accused Iran of carrying out cowardly attacks against civilians in Bahrain and Kuwait. GCC Secretary-General Jassim Mohammed al-Budaiwi also accused Iran of hostile actions against Gulf nations. The statement further alleged that Iran's attacks amounted to violations of international law and accepted norms. Al-Budaiwi also urged the international community to take a firm stand and end Iran's aggression. The Gulf Council Secretary-General said, and I quote, "The attacks reflect the Iranian regime's insistence on pursuing rejected hostile policies targeting the security, stability, and sovereignty of the member states. Iran is in violation of international law, the United Nations Charter and all international norms, stressing that this requires a firm international stance to put an end to these dangerous Iranian aggressive practices. We underscored that the security of the Kingdom of Bahrain and the State of Kuwait is an integral part of the security of the GCC states, and that the Cooperation Council states stand united in confronting these attacks and fully support all measures and procedures taken by the two countries to defend their security, sovereignty, and territorial integrity." End quote. On June 3rd, the United States and Iran exchanged missile strikes across the region despite a fragile ceasefire. American bases in Kuwait and Bahrain came under fire following U.S. self-defense strikes against Iran. Press TV's report said, and I quote, "Iran's IRGC announced that it struck a U.S. military airbase and the U.S. Fifth Fleet's headquarters with missiles and drones in retaliation for American attacks. The IRGC said a U.S. warplane first hit an Iranian tanker near the Strait of Hormuz late last night, causing engine room damage. In response, the IRGC targeted a U.S.-affiliated vessel named Panaya with naval missiles. After a subsequent U.S. strike on an IRGC telecom tower on Keshem Island, the IRGC Aerospace Force attacked a U.S. air and helicopter base in a regional country as well as the Fifth Fleet's command center. The IRGC warned that any violation of security in the Strait of Hormuz would bring a harsh price for the U.S. military, unquote. Iran has reportedly stopped communicating with mediators regarding a possible extension of the ceasefire. However, U.S. President Donald Trump rejected those claims and insisted that talks with Iran remain ongoing. Meanwhile, a day after the deadly attack, Kuwaiti authorities released a video clip showing the exact moment the airport terminal was struck, footage that has circulated widely and intensified international scrutiny of the incident. Kuwait has released security footage showing the first moments of what it alleges was an Iranian drone attack, giving the world a stark visual of the incoming strike. In the clip, a small, fast-moving object, described as a drone, is seen diving in and slamming into the passenger terminal roof, followed by an explosion and a burst of flames. Kuwaiti authorities have publicly claimed that the weapon was an Iranian-made Shahd drone, accusing Tehran of deliberately targeting a civilian airport. Officials say at least one person was killed and more than 50 others were injured in the airport attack. turning an ordinary day of travel into a deadly battlefield scene. Iran, however, has refuted Kuwait's accusations, arguing that the damage was actually caused by a US-supplied Patriot air defense system that malfunctioned. According to reports citing the IRGC, Iranian forces never fired at the terminal itself. Instead, they claim a misfired US Patriot interceptor fell onto the building after failing to stop incoming Iranian missiles.